You think Christmas dinner always meant golden turkeys and spiral hams? Think again. For generations of struggling families, holiday tables held dishes born from empty pockets and full hearts, meals that turned scraps into celebration. Let's dig into 30 poor man Christmas dinners no one makes anymore. Mock turkey was the centerpiece of Christmas tables where real birds were impossible luxuries. A loaf of seasoned bread and vegetables shaped and roasted to resemble the turkey families couldn't afford. The preparation began days ahead, stale bread saved and crumbled, mixed with sautéed onions, celery, sage, and whatever drippings could be scraped from previous meals. The mixture was packed into a mound, shaped to suggest a bird's body, sometimes with carved extensions mimicking drumsticks. Basted with butter or bacon grease, the loaf roasted until golden brown, its surface crackling and aromatic. Served on the best platter with gravy pooled around its base, mock turkey allowed families to participate in the ritual of carving at the table. Children who never knew the difference grew up believing this was how Christmas dinner looked. The dish represented dignity despite poverty, the determination to celebrate properly even when circumstances demanded creativity. City chicken appeared on Christmas tables across working-class neighborhoods where actual poultry remained a distant dream, cubes of cheap pork threaded onto wooden skewers to mimic drumsticks. Butchers sold pork scraps for pennies, and clever cooks transformed these humble cuts into something festive by breading and frying the assembled skewers until golden. The name was pure aspiration. There was no chicken involved, just the wish for something fancier than what the budget allowed. Each skewer was rolled in flour, dipped in egg, then coated in breadcrumbs before frying in hot lard. The finished pieces looked almost elegant, their stick handles suggesting drumsticks that could be eaten with fingers. Mothers presented them proudly on Christmas platters, the illusion complete enough that children felt they were eating something special. City chicken cost a fraction of real poultry, yet delivered the same crispy-coated satisfaction. Oxtail stew simmered for hours on Christmas Eve, transforming the cheapest cuts from the butcher into rich, gelatinous luxury that rivaled any expensive roast. Butchers practically gave away oxtails, considering them scraps fit only for those who couldn't afford better. But patient cooks knew the secret. Those bony sections contained collagen that melted into silky richness when braised low and slow. The tails were browned in batches, then returned to heavy pots with onions, carrots, turnips, and whatever root vegetables the cellar still held. Hours of gentle simmering transformed tough meat into fork-tender strands, surrounded by gravy thick enough to coat a spoon. The marrow melted into the liquid, adding depth that no other cut could provide. Families gathered around steaming bowls, using bread to capture every drop. Oxtail stew represented the wisdom of slow cooking, the understanding that time and heat could elevate even the humblest ingredients. Neck bones and rice stretched across Christmas tables in homes where ham was a luxury and turkey was a dream. The bony cuts simmered until their meat fell apart into savory shreds. Pork neck bones cost almost nothing because butchers considered them more bone than meat, but families knew better. Hours of simmering extracted every bit of flavor, the bones releasing gelatin that thickened the cooking liquid into rich gravy. The meat, though sparse, was deeply flavored and satisfying when spooned over mounds of rice that absorbed the pork-infused liquid. Some families added onions and garlic, others kept it simple with just salt and pepper. The dish required no special skills, only patience and a heavy pot that could withstand hours on the stove. Children learned to pick around bones, finding every tender morsel hidden in the joints. Neck bones and rice represented survival cooking at its most practical, turning what others discarded into Christmas dinner. Ham bone soup became Christmas dinner when the bone itself was the only gift families could afford, the remnant of someone else's feast transformed into a meal for those with less. Churches and wealthier neighbors sometimes donated ham bones after their own celebrations, and grateful recipients knew exactly how to honor such gifts. The bone went into the largest pot with dried beans that had been soaking overnight, along with onions, carrots, and potatoes from the root cellar. Hours of simmering coaxed every bit of smoky flavor from the bone, while beans softened into creamy submission. The soup thickened as starches released, becoming more stew than broth by the time it reached the table. Families ladled generous portions into bowls, knowing this single bone would feed everyone for days. Ham bone soup represented community and generosity, the understanding that sharing meant everyone could celebrate. Crackling cornbread emerged from cast-iron skillets at Christmas dinners, where wheat flour was too expensive and leftover pork scraps needed purpose. The cracklings, crispy bits of rendered pork fat and skin, were folded into cornmeal batter, adding richness and texture that transformed simple bread into something special. The batter was poured into a skillet greased with lard and preheated until smoking, creating a crust that shattered when cut. Inside, the cornbread stayed moist and tender, studded with salty, chewy cracklings that delivered bursts of pork flavor in every bite. The bread accompanied whatever else appeared on the table, soaking up gravies and pot liquors that might otherwise go to waste. Making crackling cornbread used every part of the hog, wasting nothing in kitchens where waste was unthinkable. Children fought over the corner pieces with the most crust. Crackling cornbread represented ingenuity, the transformation of scraps into something eagerly anticipated. Poor man's fruitcake appeared at Christmas when the traditional version's expensive ingredients were beyond reach, substituting whatever dried fruits and nuts the pantry held. Real fruitcake required candied citrus, exotic spices, and aged spirits that working families couldn't afford. The poor man's version used raisins, dried apples, and whatever nuts could be gathered from nearby trees, bound with molasses instead of sugar. The batter was dense and dark, baked slowly until a knife came out clean, then wrapped in cloth to age until Christmas morning. Though lacking candied cherries and imported almonds, this humble cake delivered the same comforting density and spiced sweetness that defined holiday baking. Families sliced it thin, making each loaf last through the season. Poor man's fruitcake represented adaptation, the willingness to participate in tradition even when resources demanded substitution. The taste was different, but the meaning remained. Vinegar pie filled the dessert spot on Christmas tables when eggs were scarce and lemons impossibly expensive, its tangy sweetness fooling children who never suspected the humble ingredient list. The filling required only sugar, flour, butter, water, and a splash of vinegar that provided the tartness usually contributed by citrus. Cooked slowly until thickened, the mixture was poured into pastry shells and baked until set, emerging with a custardy texture that rivaled proper lemon pie. The vinegar's sharpness mellowed during baking, leaving only pleasant tang that balanced the sweetness. Mothers guarded the recipe's secret, knowing children would reject dessert made with vinegar if they knew. The pie cost mere pennies, yet delivered satisfaction equal to fancy bakery creations. Vinegar pie represented Depression-era ingenuity, proof that chemistry and creativity could overcome poverty's limitations. Families served it proudly, creating Christmas memories that had nothing to do with expensive ingredients. Bread pudding with hard sauce transformed stale bread into Christmas luxury, the dried loaves soaked in sweetened milk and eggs until they became something entirely new. Families saved bread heels and dried slices for weeks, knowing they'd find purpose in holiday pudding. The bread was torn and soaked until saturated, then mixed with sugar, vanilla, spices, and beaten eggs before baking until puffed and golden. Raisins or dried apples added sweetness when available. The hard sauce made the dish special, butter beaten with sugar and a splash of whiskey until fluffy. Warm pudding topped with cold hard sauce created temperature contrast that elevated humble ingredients into something approaching elegant. Children received smaller portions of the whiskey-laced sauce, while adults appreciated its warming qualities. Bread pudding represented transformation, the alchemical process of turning yesterday's scraps into tomorrow's celebration. Nothing was wasted when stale bread became dessert. Rabbit fricassee graced Christmas tables in rural communities where wild game provided protein that store-bought meat could never match in freshness or economy. Hunters brought home rabbits throughout December, and the best were saved for holiday feasts. The rabbit was jointed and browned in bacon fat until golden, then braised in milk or cream with onions and herbs until the meat fell from the bones. The cooking liquid thickened into velvety gravy that coated every piece, served over biscuits or alongside mashed potatoes. Rabbit meat was lean and delicate, its mild flavor absorbing whatever seasonings the cook applied. Families who hunted their Christmas dinner understood the connection between land and table that store-bought food could never provide. Rabbit fricassee represented self-sufficiency, the ability to provide for family through skill rather than cash. The dish tasted of independence and the understanding that nature offered abundance. Squirrel stew bubbled on Christmas stovetops in Appalachian homes where hunting provided what wages couldn't. The small game animals transformed into rich, satisfying meals through patience and skill. Hunters brought home squirrels by the dozen throughout autumn, and the fattest ones were saved for holiday cooking. The animals were cleaned and jointed, then browned in bacon drippings before being covered with water and simmered for hours with potatoes, onions, and wild herbs gathered from nearby woods. The meat became tender and flavorful, its slightly gamey taste mellowed by long cooking and balanced by vegetables. Families gathered around large pots, ladling stew into bowls and using cornbread to soak up the rich gravy. Children grew up considering squirrel stew a holiday treat, never knowing that wealthier families might have looked down on such fare. The dish represented mountain self-reliance, the ability to provide Christmas dinner through skill with a rifle rather than money at the store. Salt pork and potatoes appeared on Christmas tables when fresh meat was beyond reach, the preserved pork providing flavor and fat that transformed simple potatoes into something worth celebrating. Salt pork cost far less than fresh cuts and kept indefinitely in cool cellars, making it the protein that struggling families could actually afford. Thick slices were fried until crispy and rendered, their fat saved for cooking potatoes that were sliced and fried in the drippings until golden and crisp. The combination was simple but deeply satisfying, the salt and fat making each potato bite rich and flavorful. Some families added onions to stretch the meal further, others kept it pure. The dish required no special occasion to appear, but on Christmas it was presented with extra care, the crispiest pieces reserved for children. Salt pork and potatoes represented making do with what was affordable, finding celebration in the humblest ingredients through careful preparation and love. Hoppin' John carried good luck wishes into Christmas dinner across the South, the combination of black-eyed peas and rice symbolizing coins and prosperity for the coming year. The dish cost almost nothing to prepare. Dried peas soaked overnight, rice bought in bulk, and whatever pork scraps the kitchen held. A ham hock or piece of fatback simmered with the peas, infusing them with smoky richness while the rice cooked separately. The two were combined on plates, the peas spooned over fluffy rice and topped with cooking liquid that had become thick and flavorful. Families ate Hoppin' John believing it would bring fortune, the superstition adding meaning to a meal that poverty might otherwise have made shameful. Children were taught to eat every pea on their plate to ensure the luck would stick. Hoppin' John represented hope dressed as dinner, the belief that better times lay ahead even when the present offered only beans and rice. Chicken feet soup simmered on Christmas stoves in communities where every part of the bird found purpose, the gelatinous feet creating broth richer than any made from expensive cuts. Butchers gave away feet for pennies or nothing, considering them waste that customers would reject. But knowing cooks understood that feet contained collagen that melted into silky, bodybuilding broth during hours of slow simmering. The feet were cleaned thoroughly, blanched to remove impurities, then added to pots with vegetables and herbs. The resulting soup was golden and rich, its texture almost creamy from dissolved gelatin. Families served it as a first course before whatever main dish the budget allowed, the soup warming bodies and filling stomachs. Children might have been squeamish about the feet floating in their bowls, but they loved the taste. Chicken feet soup represented the wisdom of waste-nothing cooking, transforming discards into nourishment. Beans and cornbread made Christmas dinner in homes where meat was unthinkable luxury, the combination providing complete protein that kept bodies strong through winter's coldest days. Dried beans, pintos, Great Northerns, or whatever variety was cheapest, soaked overnight before simmering all day with onion and salt. The cornbread baked in cast iron, its bottom crust crackling and golden from the preheated skillet. Together, beans and cornbread created a meal that was both filling and nutritious, the amino acids from each combining to provide what neither could alone. Families ladled beans into bowls and crumbled cornbread on top, the bread soaking up the bean liquor until it became almost like dumplings. The meal cost pennies but delivered satisfaction that expensive dishes couldn't match. Beans and cornbread represented survival, the understanding that celebration didn't require wealth, only the wisdom to use humble ingredients well. Stuffed cabbage rolls stretched small amounts of meat into Christmas meals that could feed entire families, each leaf wrapped around filling that made a little go a long way. Ground pork or beef mixed with rice, onions, and seasonings created filling that was parceled carefully into blanched cabbage leaves, each roll containing just enough meat to provide flavor without excess. The rolls were packed into pots, covered with tomato sauce or broth, then simmered until the cabbage became tender and the filling cooked through. 1 pound of meat could produce a dozen rolls, enough to fill every plate at the table. Families of Eastern European heritage brought the tradition to America, where it became poor man's Christmas dinner for immigrant communities. The rolls were served with the cooking liquid spooned over, each bite delivering cabbage sweetness and savory meat filling. Stuffed cabbage represented the immigrant wisdom of making resources stretch through clever preparation. Liver and onions appeared on Christmas tables when the luxury cuts went to wealthier customers. The organ meat sold for pennies to families who knew how to make it delicious. Liver was soaked in milk to remove any bitterness, then sliced thin and dredged in seasoned flour before frying in hot fat until crispy outside but still pink within. Onions fried alongside turned sweet and caramelized, their flavor balancing the liver's mineral richness. The combination was served over mashed potatoes or with bread to soak up the pan drippings that carried concentrated flavor. Children either loved or hated liver, but parents served it knowing the iron and vitamins it provided were essential for growing bodies during lean times. Liver and onions cost a fraction of steak, but delivered more nutrition per bite. The dish represented practical eating, the understanding that organ meat sustained life as effectively as the muscle cuts that cost far more. Potato soup with dumplings became Christmas dinner when the cellar held nothing but potatoes and flour. The humble ingredients transformed through cooking into something that felt like celebration. Potatoes were diced and simmered in water with onions and whatever seasonings the pantry held until they softened and began breaking down into the liquid. Meanwhile, dumplings were mixed from flour, salt, and water or milk, then dropped by spoonfuls into the simmering soup where they puffed and cooked through. The finished dish was thick and hearty, each bowl containing potato chunks, fluffy dumplings, and rich broth thickened by potato starch. A bit of butter or bacon fat added richness when available, transforming plain vegetables into comfort. Potato soup with dumplings represented the determination to make Christmas dinner from whatever was on hand, refusing to let poverty steal the holiday spirit from families who deserved celebration. Fried mush appeared on Christmas morning tables when the budget allowed nothing fancier. The humble cornmeal transformed through a 2-day process into something crispy and satisfying. The day before, cornmeal was cooked into thick porridge, then poured into loaf pans and chilled until firm enough to slice. Christmas morning, the slices were fried in bacon fat or lard until golden and crispy on both sides, then served with molasses, syrup, or whatever sweetener the pantry held. The contrast between crispy exterior and creamy interior made each bite interesting, and the corn flavor was comforting and familiar. Fried mush required almost no expense. Cornmeal was the cheapest grain, and the cooking fat came from previous meals. The dish represented the ingenuity of poor cooks who knew that texture and technique could elevate even the most basic ingredients into something worth serving on Christmas morning. Pot liquor and cornbread dumplings turned the cooking liquid from greens into Christmas soup that wasted nothing and nourished everyone. After collards or turnip greens simmered with pork for hours, the resulting pot liquor was rich with vitamins, minerals, and smoky pork flavor. Rather than discarding this precious liquid, cooks dropped cornmeal dumplings into the simmering broth, where they puffed and absorbed the flavorful liquor. The dumplings were served in bowls with pot liquor ladled over, creating a complete meal from what might otherwise have been thrown away. Families understood that the liquid held as much nutrition as the greens themselves, making pot liquor too valuable to waste. Children slurped the broth and ate dumplings while adults appreciated the economy of the dish. Pot liquor and dumplings represented the waste-nothing philosophy that kept poor families fed. Every drop of cooking liquid honored and used. Tomato gravy over biscuits appeared on Christmas morning tables when meat was scarce, but tomatoes had been canned from summer gardens, the tangy red gravy providing flavor that plain biscuits couldn't offer alone. The gravy started with bacon drippings or butter, flour stirred in to make a roux, then home-canned tomatoes added with their liquid until the mixture thickened into something between sauce and gravy. Sugar balanced the tomatoes' acidity while salt and pepper rounded out the flavor. The gravy was ladled hot over fresh biscuits split open on plates, their fluffy interiors soaking up the tangy liquid. Children loved the bright flavor, and adults appreciated how the dish stretched pantry staples into something festive. Tomato gravy over biscuits represented the ingenuity of preserving summer's bounty for winter celebrations, turning canned goods into Christmas breakfast. The dish proved that holiday meals could be built from whatever the cellar held. Chitterlings simmered for hours on Christmas Eve in homes where every part of the hog found purpose. The intestines cleaned and cooked until tender enough to eat. The preparation was labor-intensive. The chitlins required thorough cleaning and multiple rinses before they could be boiled with onions, vinegar, and seasonings. The smell was distinctive and polarizing, announcing to the neighborhood that a family was preparing traditional soul food. After hours of cooking, the chitlins became tender and flavorful, served with hot sauce and accompanied by cornbread and greens. Families who grew up eating chitterlings considered them a delicacy, while others couldn't get past the idea of eating intestines. The dish represented African-American culinary tradition, the transformation of discarded parts into cherished holiday food. Chitterlings connected generations through taste and memory, each batch carrying forward the knowledge of ancestors who had survived on such humble fare. Pickled pig's feet sat in jars on Christmas tables as appetizers and accompaniments, the preserved feet providing protein and gelatin that had been prepared weeks earlier. The feet were cleaned, boiled until tender, then packed into jars with vinegar, spices, and onions that preserved and flavored them simultaneously. The pickling liquid turned slightly gelatinous from collagen released during cooking, and the meat became tangy and tender. Families served pickled pig's feet cold, the meat pulled from bones and eaten with fingers or forks. The dish was economical. Feet cost almost nothing at the butcher, and the preservation meant it could be prepared well ahead of the holiday rush. Children either loved or avoided the strange texture, while adults appreciated both the flavor and the tradition. Pickled pig's feet represented the practical wisdom of preparing ahead, using preservation to transform cheap cuts into Christmas delicacies. Salmon patties became Christmas dinner when canned fish provided the only affordable protein. The pink cakes fried until crispy and served with gravy or alongside vegetables from the cellar. Canned salmon was mixed with crushed crackers or breadcrumbs, egg to bind, and onion for flavor, then shaped into patties and fried in hot fat until golden on both sides. The fish's distinctive flavor came through despite the additions, each patty delivering protein that fresh fish would have cost too much to provide. Families served salmon patties with white gravy made from the pan drippings, stretching the meal further while adding richness. The cans themselves were saved and repurposed, nothing wasted in households where every resource mattered. Salmon patties represented accessibility, the ability to serve fish for Christmas dinner regardless of geography or income. The dish proved that celebration didn't require fresh ingredients, just skill in preparing what was affordable. Rice pudding appeared on Christmas dessert tables when eggs and milk were available, but expensive ingredients like chocolate and nuts were not. The creamy custard studded with raisins, satisfying sweet cravings simply. Leftover rice was baked with milk, eggs, sugar, and vanilla until it set into a creamy pudding that could be served warm or cold. Raisins added sweetness and texture, plumping in the custard as it baked until they burst with concentrated flavor. Some families added cinnamon or nutmeg, others kept the flavor pure and simple. The pudding was economical, using rice that might otherwise have been discarded and eggs from backyard chickens that cost nothing but feed. Children loved its gentle sweetness, and adults appreciated how it stretched limited ingredients into a dessert that looked and tasted intentional rather than improvised. Rice pudding represented thrift dressed as tradition, the transformation of leftovers into something worth serving on Christmas Day. Molasses cake emerged from ovens on Christmas morning in homes where refined sugar was too expensive, the dark sweetener providing depth of flavor that white sugar couldn't match. Flour, molasses, eggs, and spices were beaten together and baked until the cake rose and set, its surface dark and fragrant with the smell of ginger and warm spices. The flavor was complex, sweet but with bitter undertones, spicy from ginger and cinnamon that enhanced the molasses rather than competing with it. The cake was served plain or with a simple glaze, its dense texture satisfying in ways that lighter cakes couldn't be. Molasses was affordable because it was a byproduct of sugar refining, making it the sweetener poor families relied on throughout the year. The cake could be baked ahead and stored, improving with age as the flavors melded together. Molasses cake represented making virtue of necessity, discovering that cheaper ingredients could produce results as satisfying as expensive ones. Fried pies appeared on Christmas tables as portable desserts that stretched fruit preserves into something special, the half-moon pastries filled with whatever jam or dried fruit the pantry held. Pie dough was rolled thin and cut into circles, spoonfuls of filling placed on one side before the dough was folded, and edges crimped tight with fork tines to seal in the sweetness. The pies were fried in hot fat until golden and crispy, the filling bubbling inside while the crust shattered with each bite. Apple, peach, and berry were common fillings, made from fruit preserved during summer harvest when orchards and bushes overflowed with abundance. The pies could be eaten by hand, making them perfect for children and for taking to church gatherings where plates were scarce. Fried pies represented the genius of transforming pantry staples into festive treats, each one a small celebration wrapped in flaky pastry. The technique allowed families to serve individual desserts that looked impressive. Dandelion greens with fatback appeared on Christmas tables in communities where foraging supplemented what gardens and wages couldn't provide. The bitter greens balanced by smoky pork. Dandelions gathered in late fall or early winter were cleaned and simmered with fatback until tender, their bitterness mellowed by long cooking and rich pork fat that melted into the greens. The greens provided vitamins that stored vegetables had lost over months in the root cellar, and the fatback added calories and deep satisfaction. Some families added vinegar or hot sauce to brighten the flavor. Others let the simple combination of greens and pork speak for itself. Children often resisted the bitter flavor, but adults understood the nutrition the greens provided during winter months when fresh food was scarce. Dandelion greens with fatback represented the knowledge of wild foods that kept families healthy, the ability to find nourishment where others saw only weeds. Water, gravy, and biscuits became Christmas breakfast when there was nothing else in the pantry. The gravy made from flour, fat, and water stretched to cover biscuits that were the only food remaining. Bacon drippings or lard was heated in a cast-iron skillet, flour stirred in until golden, then water added gradually until the mixture thickened into gravy. Salt and pepper were the only seasonings, and the gravy was ladled over biscuits that had been split open to catch every drop. The meal was filling if not festive, and families ate it knowing that even water gravy meant they had something for breakfast on Christmas morning. The dish represented the absolute bottom of poverty cooking, the meal when every other resource was exhausted. Yet even water gravy was served on the best plates at Christmas, because dignity mattered even when the budget didn't allow for more. Water gravy and biscuits proved that love could make any meal feel like celebration. Potato peel soup stretched the ultimate scraps into Christmas dinner when even whole potatoes were too valuable to spare. The peels simmered into broth that filled empty stomachs with whatever nourishment could be extracted. After potatoes were peeled for other uses, the skins were saved, washed carefully, and boiled with onions and whatever seasonings the kitchen held. The starch in the peels released during cooking, thickening the liquid into something between broth and gravy that clung to the spoon. Some families added a bit of milk when available. Others kept the soup clear and simple. The flavor was subtle, earthy, and comforting despite its humble origins. Children ate potato peel soup without knowing it represented the end of resources, while parents served it with forced cheerfulness. The dish represented survival at its most basic, the refusal to waste even the scraps of scraps. Potato peel soup was Christmas dinner when there was nothing else. Glorified rice transformed leftover grain into a festive dessert salad that children begged for and adults secretly loved just as much. Cold-cooked rice was folded with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream until it became unrecognizable from its humble origins. Some versions added chopped nuts or coconut for texture, while others kept the base simple. The dish needed thorough chilling, allowing flavors to meld and rice to soften in the creamy mixture. Served in crystal bowls, glorified rice looked almost bridal, pale and dotted with bright cherry red. The sweetness made it controversial as a side dish, yet families insisted it belonged alongside turkey and gravy. This was thrift elevated to celebration, using rice that might otherwise go to waste. Mothers passed down specific ratios, each family believing their version superior. Glorified rice represented an era when creativity with basics was celebrated, when making something from nothing was its own form of kitchen magic. Hog maw stuffed for Christmas was a centerpiece dish demonstrating the resourcefulness passed down through generations of Black families. The pig's stomach was cleaned meticulously before being filled with seasoned sausage, potatoes, onions, and cabbage. Slowly roasted until the outer skin turned crispy and the filling became tender, this dish could feed entire extended families gathering for holiday celebrations. The preparation connected Black Americans to Southern roots and traditions stretching back through slavery, when using every part of the animal meant survival. Sliced thick and served with greens and cornbread, hog maw delivered rich, porky flavor that satisfied the deepest hunger. Children who grew up eating this dish remembered its distinctive appearance long after leaving home. Though rarely prepared today, hog maw represented the whole animal cooking that defined Black foodways for generations. Lane cake was the showstopper of Southern Black Christmas gatherings, a towering creation demanding skill and ingredients that pushed household budgets to their limits. Named after Emma Rylander Lane of Alabama, this cake featured delicate white layers filled with bourbon, raisins, coconut, and pecans cooked until thick and glossy. Black women adapted the recipe across generations, adding their own touches, more bourbon for some, candied cherries for others, while maintaining its legendary character. The filling required constant stirring over low heat, a meditative process that couldn't be rushed. Assembling the cake took steady hands, each layer carefully balanced before being crowned with fluffy white frosting. Lane cake appeared on Christmas sideboards throughout Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, signaling the family had spared no expense for the holiday. Today, few bakers attempt its complexity, letting this masterpiece fade into memory. Sweet potato coffee cake with cinnamon drizzle was the Thanksgiving morning centerpiece that brought families together before the turkey touched the oven. Grandmothers mashed leftover sweet potatoes into thick batter seasoned with nutmeg, cinnamon, and cloves, then baked it in cast-iron pans that created golden, crispy bottoms. The drizzle came from powdered sugar mixed with milk and vanilla, poured over while warm so it soaked into every crevice. This wasn't fancy bakery cake, but something born from thrift, using plentiful fall sweet potatoes. Families gathered around kitchen tables, cutting thick slices while coffee percolated. Children fought over corner pieces where the drizzle pooled. The cake stayed moist through the weekend. It represented more than food, it showed how grandmothers stretched resources while making mornings special. Today's brunches serve croissants, but they can't touch the memory of sweet potato coffee cake warming cold November mornings. Three-bean salad appeared at nearly every holiday gathering throughout the 1970s, its colorful layers making it as beautiful as it was economical. Green beans, yellow wax beans, and kidney beans were drained from cans and combined with sliced onions and bell peppers in large glass bowls. A marinade of oil, vinegar, sugar, and spices was poured over everything. Then the salad rested overnight while flavors melded. The result was tangy and crisp, each bean variety offering different texture and color. What made three-bean salad practical was its cost. Canned beans were inexpensive, and the salad stretched to feed crowds without straining budgets. It traveled well, too, making it a potluck favorite that arrived looking good. The dish required no heating and could sit at room temperature through long gatherings. Three-bean salad proved that simple preparations from pantry staples could earn places on festive tables alongside more elaborate offerings. Brandied peaches were the jeweled preserves that Black grandmothers tucked into cupboards each summer, waiting for Christmas morning when they would finally appear on breakfast tables. Fresh peaches were carefully peeled and halved, then simmered in sugar syrup infused with cinnamon, cloves, and generous amounts of brandy until they became translucent and deeply perfumed. The preserved fruit was ladled into glass jars and sealed, their golden contents visible through the glass, like edible treasures. By December, the peaches had absorbed the brandy completely, their flesh soft and boozy with complex sweetness that balanced fruit, spice, and spirits. Served alongside ham and biscuits, they cut through the richness of holiday breakfast while adding their own sophisticated note. Children were usually given only the syrup, while adults savored the brandied fruit that represented months of anticipation. These preserves required summer's abundance and December's patience, connecting the seasons through flavor. Pickled pig ears appeared on Black Christmas buffets as the briny, chewy delicacy that only the adventurous truly appreciated. The ears were first cleaned thoroughly and simmered until tender, then sliced thin and packed into jars with vinegar, onions, and hot peppers. Weeks of pickling transformed the cartilaginous ears into something tangy and satisfying, their unique texture providing contrast to the rich meats and sweet desserts dominating holiday spreads. Served cold, straight from the jar, pig ears were eaten with crackers or simply picked up and savored by those who understood their appeal. Children often wrinkled their noses, but elders who had grown up with this dish looked forward to its appearance each Christmas. The pickled ears represented the waste-nothing philosophy that had sustained Black families through generations of scarcity. Making them required planning and patience. The ears needed weeks in brine to develop proper flavor. Few modern cooks undertake this preparation anymore. Scrambled eggs with onions and peppers cooked in bacon grease created Thanksgiving meals that were colorful, flavorful, and economical. Fresh eggs were beaten until frothy, then poured into skillets where bacon had just been fried, leaving behind precious drippings. Diced onions and bell peppers, often saved from preparing dinner vegetables, were added directly as the eggs cooked. The vegetables softened while adding sweetness and texture. This breakfast used ingredients already in the kitchen for dinner preparations, preventing additional expense. Grandmothers cooked in large cast-iron skillets, making enough to feed 10 or more people. The bacon grease added richness and savory depth that butter couldn't match. Children picked out the peppers but ate the eggs eagerly. Adults appreciated the protein and vegetables, knowing the breakfast would sustain them through hours of cooking. Scrambled eggs with onions and peppers proved simple ingredients could create satisfaction. Carrot copper pennies were a make-ahead marvel that freed Christmas cooks from last-minute vegetable preparation. Carrots were sliced into thin coins, blanched until tender, then marinated for days in a tangy sauce of tomato soup, oil, vinegar, and Worcestershire sauce. The coins absorbed the bright orange-red marinade until they glistened like polished copper. Green bell pepper rings and sliced onions joined the carrots, adding color contrast and crunch. What made copper pennies invaluable was their timing. They actually improved with age, developing deeper flavor after 3 or 4 days in the refrigerator. Busy hostesses could prepare them the weekend before Christmas, freeing precious hours on the holiday itself. Served cold straight from the jar, they required no reheating or fussing. The dish appeared at church potlucks and family gatherings throughout the season. Carrot copper pennies proved that practical cooking could also be delicious, a lesson in efficiency that modern meal preppers have rediscovered. Chitlins held a complicated but cherished place on Black Christmas tables, their preparation a ritual beginning days before the holiday that required dedication few modern cooks possess. These pig intestines demanded hours of cleaning, washing, scraping, and soaking in salted water until every impurity was removed. The smell during cooking was intense and unmistakable, announcing to neighborhoods that Christmas preparations were underway. Simmered slowly with onions, vinegar, and red pepper flakes, chitlins transformed into a delicacy that divided even family members. Those who loved them anticipated Christmas morning when platters appeared alongside scrambled eggs and hot sauce. Those who couldn't stomach them quietly excused themselves. The dish connected Black Americans to ancestors who transformed discarded parts into sustenance, turning survival into celebration. Chitlins represented cultural memory, proof that dignity could be found in making something wonderful from what others threw away. Brandied peaches were the jeweled preserves that Black grandmothers tucked into cupboards each summer, waiting for Christmas morning when they would finally appear on breakfast tables. Fresh peaches were carefully peeled and halved, then simmered in sugar syrup infused with cinnamon, cloves, and generous amounts of brandy until they became translucent and deeply perfumed. The preserved fruit was ladled into glass jars and sealed, their golden contents visible through the glass, like edible treasures. By December, the peaches had absorbed the brandy completely, their flesh soft and boozy with complex sweetness that balanced fruit, spice, and spirits. Served alongside ham and biscuits, they cut through the richness of holiday breakfast while adding their own sophisticated note. Children were usually given only the syrup, while adults savored the brandied fruit that represented months of anticipation. These preserves required summer's abundance and December's patience, connecting the seasons through flavor. Cornmeal mush with sorghum butter filled stomachs and provided sustained energy for the long cooking day ahead. The mush was made by slowly cooking coarse cornmeal in water or milk until it thickened into smooth porridge, stirred constantly to prevent lumps. Sorghum butter came from beating softened butter with dark sorghum syrup until it turned golden and spreadable, creating sweetness without expensive sugar. Served hot in bowls with generous dollops melting on top, this breakfast cost pennies but delivered warmth. In rural homes where money was tight but corn was abundant, this dish appeared regularly on Thanksgiving morning. Grandmothers understood that starting with hot food meant children would be patient while the feast was prepared. The cornmeal's earthy flavor balanced perfectly with sorghum's deep molasses notes. Families ate in shifts, with the cook eating last. This wasn't deprivation, but resourcefulness transformed into tradition. Creamed celery was the sophisticated cousin of other creamed vegetables, turning the overlooked stalk into something worthy of fine china and silver spoons. Cooks sliced celery on the diagonal and simmered it until tender, then folded it into rich white sauce enriched with cream and butter. Seasonings were delicate: white pepper, a touch of nutmeg, perhaps parsley for color. The celery retained gentle crunch even in the sauce, providing textural interest other creamed vegetables lacked. This was a dish for formal dinners and holiday gatherings, its mild elegance complementing rather than competing with richer offerings. Pale green and white colors added sophistication to tables heavy with browns. Some cooks topped creamed celery with toasted almonds, creating a gratin that bordered on indulgent. The dish required fresh celery at its crispest, making winter holidays the perfect occasion. Creamed celery has virtually disappeared from modern menus, a casualty of changing tastes that forgot how refined simple vegetables could become. Bourbon-soaked fruitcake was the crown jewel of Black Christmas celebrations, requiring weeks of preparation that modern bakers rarely possess. Families began mixing dried fruits, nuts, and candied citrus in late October, letting them soak in bourbon until plump and fragrant. The batter was dense with molasses, brown sugar, and warm spices that filled kitchens with aromas announcing the season had arrived. Grandmothers wrapped finished cakes in cheesecloth soaked with more bourbon, storing them where they aged like fine wine. Every few days, someone would unwrap the cakes and brush them with fresh spirits, transforming simple ingredients into something extraordinary. By Christmas morning, these cakes had developed depth no store-bought version could match. Sliced thin and served alongside coffee, they became centerpieces of holiday tables from Georgia to Illinois. The tradition required commitment and trust that good things come to those who wait. Chitlins held a complicated but cherished place on Black Christmas tables, their preparation a ritual beginning days before the holiday that required dedication few modern cooks possess. These pig intestines demanded hours of cleaning, washing, scraping, and soaking in salted water until every impurity was removed. The smell during cooking was intense and unmistakable, announcing to neighborhoods that Christmas preparations were underway. Simmered slowly with onions, vinegar, and red pepper flakes, chitlins transformed into a delicacy that divided even family members. Those who loved them anticipated Christmas morning when platters appeared alongside scrambled eggs and hot sauce. Those who couldn't stomach them quietly excused themselves. The dish connected Black Americans to ancestors who transformed discarded parts into sustenance, turning survival into celebration. Chitlins represented cultural memory, proof that dignity could be found in making something wonderful from what others threw away. Leftover cornbread soaked in buttermilk and sweetened with molasses used what remained from Wednesday's supper, transforming it into Thursday morning comfort. Crumbled cornbread filled bowls, then cold buttermilk was poured over until the bread softened and absorbed the tangy liquid. Dark molasses drizzled on top provided sweetness that balanced the buttermilk's sour bite. This breakfast cost virtually nothing since it repurposed yesterday's bread and used staples every household kept. Grandmothers understood that nothing could be wasted when resources were limited. Children initially resisted the unusual combination, but learned to love its tangy sweetness. Adults appreciated how the simple bowl provided energy and nostalgia. The breakfast was especially common where buttermilk came from churning butter and molasses was cheaper than refined sugar. Leftover cornbread and buttermilk proved yesterday's food could become today's treasure. Watergate salad appeared on holiday tables throughout the 1970s, its pale green color and mysterious origins making it a conversation piece at every gathering. Named after the scandal, though no one knew why, this dish combined instant pistachio pudding with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, chopped pecans, and whipped topping folded into fluffy sweetness. Preparation took minutes, making it a favorite of busy hostesses needing impressive results without labor. The pistachio pudding gave it that distinctive mint green hue that looked festive against red tablecloths. Children adored its candy-like sweetness and surprise of crunchy nuts amid the creamy base. The dish straddled the line between salad and dessert, often appearing alongside savory dishes, though it could have ended any meal. Watergate salad represented the era's embrace of convenience products transformed into something special. Today, it survives mainly in church cookbooks and memories of those who grew up spooning seconds onto full plates. Ambrosia was the celestial dessert that appeared on Black Christmas tables in cut glass bowls, its layers of fresh fruit and coconut glistening like edible jewels. This wasn't the simplified version made with canned fruit cocktail. Proper ambrosia required cracking fresh coconuts to extract their sweet meat and milk. Grandmothers would pierce the coconut's eyes, drain the liquid, then crack the shell with hammers before prying out the white flesh to be grated by hand. Fresh oranges were peeled and sectioned, their membranes removed so only tender segments remained. Layers of coconut, orange, and sometimes pineapple were built in serving dishes, each level dusted with powdered sugar. The finished ambrosia was chilled overnight, allowing flavors to meld into something heavenly. Children gathered hoping to taste the coconut milk or sneak a cherry before dinner. The dish represented Christmas abundance, a time when families splurged on ingredients that transformed ordinary fruit into something magical. Hoghead cheese appeared on Black Christmas buffets as a savory counterpoint to the sweet desserts and rich main dishes that dominated holiday tables. This wasn't cheese at all, but a cold meat preparation made by simmering the pig's head with onions, vinegar, and spices until the meat fell from the bone. The cooking liquid, rich with natural gelatin, was mixed with the shredded meat and pressed into loaves that set firm when chilled. Sliced thin and served cold with crackers or bread, hoghead cheese delivered intense porky flavor brightened by vinegar's tang. Black families throughout the South prepared this dish in the days before Christmas. letting it set overnight so it could be sliced and arranged on platters. The preparation required skill and patience, knowing exactly when the meat was tender, how much vinegar to add, how firm the final product should be. Hoghead cheese represented the nose-to-tail cooking philosophy that ensured nothing from the holiday hog went to waste. Pan-fried liver mush with mustard on toast was Thanksgiving morning protein using preserved organ meat to create hearty breakfast. Liver mush, that Appalachian creation combining pork liver with cornmeal and spices, was sliced and fried until the exterior crisped while the interior stayed creamy. Served on toasted bread with sharp mustard, it provided sustaining nutrition. This breakfast appeared in Black households influenced by Appalachian foodways, where cultures overlapped. The liver mush was economical because organ meats were cheaper than muscle meat but packed with nutrients. Grandmothers fried it quickly, creating breakfast that lasted through morning preparations. Children acquired the taste gradually. Adults valued how the small serving provided significant protein and energy. Pan-fried liver mush with mustard represented the blending of regional traditions and practical wisdom of using every part of available animals. Candied carrots with brown sugar transformed an ordinary root vegetable into a glazed masterpiece that glistened under dining room chandeliers. Cooks sliced carrots into coins, then simmered them in butter and brown sugar until natural sugars caramelized into a sticky coating. Some recipes called for orange juice to brighten the sweetness, while others added cinnamon for warmth. The carrots emerged tender but not mushy, each piece wrapped in glossy amber glaze that caught candlelight beautifully. This dish bridged the gap between vegetable and dessert, making it popular with children who otherwise avoided anything orange on their plates. Grandmothers passed down specific butter-to-sugar ratios, guarding proportions like family secrets. The carrots were economical. A single bag could feed a dozen guests when properly prepared. Though they required constant attention to prevent burning, the reward was a side dish that disappeared faster than mashed potatoes. Candied carrots represented holiday indulgence supplied to humble ingredients. Coconut layer cake towered over Black Christmas dessert tables, its snowy white frosting and generous coating of fresh coconut making it look like something from a dream. Baking this cake was an all-day affair that began with cracking coconuts and grating their meat by hand, a task that left knuckles raw but filled kitchens with tropical fragrance. The cake layers themselves were tender white cake, sometimes flavored with coconut milk extracted from the fresh meat. Between each layer went fluffy 7-minute frosting, its glossy whiteness providing the perfect canvas for handfuls of shredded coconut pressed into every surface. The finished cake was often placed under glass domes to protect its delicate coating while it waited for Christmas dinner. Slicing revealed the snowy interior, each piece releasing the sweet perfume of coconut that had become inseparable from holiday celebration. This cake required skill that younger generations rarely developed. Neck bones and rice was the Christmas Eve supper that sustained Black families before the abundance of Christmas Day arrived, its rich broth and tender meat providing comfort and anticipation. Pork neck bones were browned until caramelized, then simmered with onions, garlic, and bay leaves until the meat fell from the bone and the liquid became thick with natural gelatin. The braising liquid, dark and intensely flavored, was ladled over rice that absorbed every drop of porky goodness. This wasn't fancy food. It was soul food, in the truest sense, nourishing body and spirit while using inexpensive cuts that stretched budgets during an expensive season. Families gathered around tables on Christmas Eve, eating neck bones and rice while anticipation for the next day's feast built. The dish required little more than time and heat, yet it delivered satisfaction that expensive cuts couldn't match. Neck bones represented Black culinary wisdom about extracting maximum flavor from minimal resources. Rice pudding with raisins and nutmeg turned leftover rice into Thanksgiving morning sweetness that felt like dessert before the day started. Cold rice was mixed with milk, eggs, sugar, and plump raisins, then baked slowly until creamy and set. Nutmeg grated fresh over the top provided warm spice that made kitchens smell like celebration. This breakfast repurposed rice left from earlier meals, ensuring nothing was wasted. The pudding could be served warm or cold, making it versatile for busy mornings. Families treasured it because it tasted indulgent while using ingredients already on hand. Children picked out the raisins if they didn't like them, but adults savored every spoonful. The custard-like texture created comfort, while the sweetness provided energy. Rice pudding with raisins wasn't just thrifty cooking, but genuine deliciousness that happened to use leftovers. Sweet potato soufflé was the showstopper that made guests gasp when it emerged from the oven, puffed high and golden like an edible cloud. Unlike dense casseroles, the soufflé required whipping potatoes with eggs separated carefully, yolks beaten into warm puree, whites whipped stiff and folded in at the last moment. The mixture was seasoned with cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla, sweetened with brown sugar, and sometimes enriched with bourbon. Baked in a straight-sided dish, it would rise dramatically, its top browning while the interior stayed impossibly light. Timing was everything. The soufflé had to travel from oven to table immediately before it could deflate. Children pressed their faces to oven doors, watching the miraculous rise with wonder. The texture was unlike anything else, simultaneously creamy and ethereal, sweet but not cloying. Sweet potato soufflé represented kitchen ambition, a willingness to attempt something difficult for the reward of witnessing that collective intake of breath around the table. Hog-head cheese appeared on Black Christmas buffets as a savory counterpoint to the sweet desserts and rich main dishes that dominated holiday tables. This wasn't cheese at all, but a cold meat preparation made by simmering the pig's head with onions, vinegar, and spices until the meat fell from the bone. The cooking liquid, rich with natural gelatin, was mixed with the shredded meat and pressed into loaves that set firm when chilled. Sliced thin and served cold with crackers or bread, hog head cheese delivered intense porky flavor brightened by vinegar's tang. Black families throughout the South prepared this dish in the days before Christmas, letting it set overnight so it could be sliced and arranged on platters. The preparation required skill and patience, knowing exactly when the meat was tender, how much vinegar to add, how firm the final product should be. Hog head cheese represented the nose-to-tail cooking philosophy that ensured nothing from the holiday hog went to waste. Christmas Eve oyster stew held a sacred place in African-American holiday traditions, served as families gathered before midnight church services. The preparation was deceptively simple. Fresh oysters simmered gently in whole milk and butter until their edges curled and the broth turned creamy with briny sweetness. Black families along the eastern seaboard and Gulf Coast had access to fresh oysters, making this dish both luxury and statement of prosperity. The stew was served in the family's best china, often bowls reserved exclusively for this annual tradition. Children sat wide-eyed as adults ladled the silky broth, their first taste of something sophisticated. Saltine crackers floated on top, softening into the warm liquid while oysters released their mineral essence. This wasn't everyday cooking, it was ceremony, a pause before Christmas Day that connected generations through shared anticipation and quiet reverence. Stuffed celery was the appetizer that kept hands busy and conversation flowing while holiday dinners finished cooking in crowded kitchens. Celery stalks were cut into uniform lengths, their natural curves creating perfect boats for various fillings. Cream cheese mixed with blue cheese crumbles was one popular option, while pimento cheese offered southern flair. Some hostesses piped the filling in decorative ridges, while others simply spread it before arranging stalks on trays. The preparation was simple enough for children to help, making it a task assigned to young hands eager to contribute. Guests would gather in living rooms, reaching for celery sticks between sips of punch. The cool crunch of celery against creamy filling provided textural pleasure that elaborate appetizers couldn't match. Stuffed celery represented the transition from everyday snack to party food. Nothing more than celery dressed up for company. Its disappearance from modern tables seems strange given its simplicity and timeless appeal. Persimmon pudding was the seasonal dessert that Black families made only when wild persimmons ripened after the first frost, their astringent flesh transformed into something honeyed and complex. Gathering persimmons required knowing which trees produced the sweetest fruit and waiting until frost had worked its magic. Eating them too early meant a mouth-puckering experience no one forgot. The ripe fruit was pushed through sieves to remove seeds and skin, creating a thick pulp that became the pudding's base. Mixed with flour, eggs, butter, and spices, then baked until set, persimmon pudding emerged dense and dark with a flavor unlike any other dessert. It tasted of autumn transformed into winter, of patience rewarded with sweetness. Families served it warm with whipped cream or hard sauce during Christmas week, its presence on the table signaling that someone had invested the considerable effort required. Persimmon pudding connected Black families to the land and seasons in ways modern desserts never could. Which poor man's Christmas dinner brings back memories of your family's table? Drop your stories in the comments, hit like and subscribe so we can keep honoring the meals that fed generations through hard times.